thank you, dear friends, from the bottom of my heart for such a loving and spirited welcome. And thank you, Mr. President, for your kind invitation to me, which I am so honored to accept. I also want to express a special thanks to you, Shmuley, who for 11 years served as rabbi here at Oxford. You and I have been working so hard to form Heal the Kids, as well as writing our book about childlike qualities. And in all of our efforts, you have been such a supportive and loving friend. Thank you. I also want to thank Toba Friedman, our Director of Operations at Heal the Kids, who is returning tonight to the alma mater where she served as a Marshall Scholar, as well as Marilyn Piels, another central member of our Heal the Kids team. I am humbled to be lecturing in a place that has previously been filled by such notable figures as Mother Teresa, Albert Einstein, Ronald Reagan, Robert Kennedy, and Malcolm X. I've even heard that Kermit the Frog made an appearance here. And I've always felt a kinship with Kermit's message that it's not easy being green. I'm sure he didn't find it any easier than being up here than I do. As I look around Oxford, I can't help but be aware of the majesty and grandeur of this great institution, not to mention the brilliance of the great and gifted minds that have roamed these streets for centuries. The walls of Oxford have not only housed the greatest philosophical and scientific geniuses, they also have ushered forth some of the most cherished creators of children's literature, from J.R.R. Tolkien to C.S. Lewis. Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland is immortalized in the stained glass windows at Christ Church. And even one of my fellow Americans, the beloved Dr. Seuss. He graced these halls and then went on to leave his mark on the imagination of millions of children throughout the world. I suppose I should start by enlisting my qualifications to speak before you this evening. Friends, I do not have to claim an academic expertise of other speakers who have addressed this hall, just as they could lay little claim at being adept at the moonwalk. And you know, Einstein in particular was really terrible at that. but I do have a claim to having experienced more places and cultures than most people will ever see. Human knowledge consists not only of libraries and parchments and ink, it also comprises of the volumes of knowledge that are written on the human heart, chiseled on the human soul, and engraved on the human psyche. And friends, I've encountered so much in this short lifetime of mine that I still cannot believe that I am only 42. I often tell Shmuley that in so years, I'm sure that I'm at least 80. And tonight, I even walk like I'm 80. So please hearken to my message, because what I have to tell you tonight can bring healing to humanity and healing to our planet. Through the grace of God, I have been fortunate to have achieved many of my artistic and professional aspirations, realized early in my lifetime. But these, friends, are accomplishments, and accomplishments alone are not who I am. Indeed, the cheery 5-year-old who belted out Rockin' Robin and Ben to adoring crowds was not indicative of the boy behind the smile. Tonight, I come before you less as an icon of pop, whatever that means, anyway, and more as an icon of a generation that no longer knows what it means to be children. All of us are products of our childhood, but I am the product of a lack of a childhood, an absence of that precious and wondrous age when we frolic playfully without a care in the world, basking in the adoration of parents and relatives, where our biggest concern is studying for that big spelling test come Monday morning. Those of you who are familiar with the Jackson 5 know that I began performing at the tender age of 5, and that ever since then, I haven't stopped dancing or singing. But while performing and making music undoubtedly remain as many of my greatest joys. When I was young, I wanted more than anything else to be a typical little boy. I wanted to build tree houses, have water balloon fights, and play hide and seek with my friends. But fate had it otherwise, and all I could do was envy the laughter and playtime that seemed to be going on all around me. There was no rest for my professional lifestyle, for on Sundays I would go pioneering, the term used for the missionary work that Jehovah's Witnesses do. And it was then that I was able to see the magic of other people's childhood. Since I was already a celebrity, I would have to put on a disguise, a fat suit, a wig, a beard, and glasses. And we would spend the day in the suburbs of Southern California, going door to door or making the rounds of shopping malls, distributing our Watchtower magazines. I loved to set foot on all those regular suburban houses and catch sight of the fireplaces and lazy boy armchairs, with kids playing Monopoly and grandmas babysitting all those wonderful, ordinary, and starry scenes of everyday life. Many, I know, would argue that these things seemed like no big deal, but to me, they were mesmerizing. I used to think that I was unique in feeling that I was without a childhood. I believe that indeed there were only a handful of people with whom I could share these feelings. When I recently met with Shirley Temple Black, the great child star of the 1930s and 40s, we said nothing to each other at first. We simply cried together. For she could share a pain with me that only others like my close friends Elizabeth Taylor and Macaulay Culkin could. I do not tell you this to gain your sympathy, but to impress upon you in my important point. It is not just Hollywood child stars that have suffered from a non-existent childhood. Today it's a universal calamity, a global catastrophe. Childhood has become the great casualty of modern day living. All around us we are producing scores of kids who have not had the joy, who have not been accorded the right, who have not been allowed the freedom of knowing what it's like to be a kid. Today's children are constantly encouraged to grow up faster, as if this period known as childhood is a burdensome stage to be endured and ushered through as swiftly as possible. And on that subject, I am certainly one of the world's greatest experts. Ours is a generation that has witnessed the abrogation of the parent-child covenant. Psychologists are publishing libraries of books detailing the destructive effects of denying one's children the unconditional love that is so necessary to the healthy development of their minds and character. And because of all the neglect, too many of our kids essentially have to raise themselves. They are growing more distant from their parents, grandparents, and other family members, as all around us the indestructible bond that once glued together the generation unravels. This violation has bred a new generation, Generation O, let's call it Generation O, that has now picked up the torch from Generation X. The O stands for a generation that has everything on the outside: wealth, success, fancy clothing, and fancy cars, but an aching emptiness on the inside. That cavity in our chest, that barrenness at our core, that void in our center, is the place where the heart's want beats and which love once occupied. It's not just the kids who are suffering, it's the parents as well. But the more we cultivate little adults in kids' bodies, the more removed we ourselves become from our own childlike qualities. And there's so much about being a child that is worth retaining in adult life.